Hey, welcome back. Another day on Curts Bug, and today it's all about the floor pans. This should be pretty straightforward. We've got a lot of the prep work already taken care of, and I've got the body separated from the chassis. It's lifted up in the air, and really all it's left to do is kind of get started. So let's hop on over here and let's take a look and see what we're doing. So here's what we got. We've got our brand new floor pans. I did purchase the heavy duty ones, which is a really thick gauge and really feels pretty nice, and they actually have a lot of weight to them. I've used the cheapo budget floor pans in the past, and really they're kind of sketchy. I have them in my dune buggy, and I really just don't feel confident in them. These are a really substantial piece, and I think they're gonna work real well for us. Something I like about these, when they were delivered, this is the rear cross member that it welds to, and I don't need this, so it's nice that it wasn't attached. I'm going to be using the original one in the car because it was in really good shape. So I'm actually really happy with what I'm seeing here. The pans are too long and they're a little too wide to fit, but truthfully I would prefer that. That way I can fit them exactly the way they should be. And all we really have to do is take a few measurements, shorten it up to the right length. Once we've got that, we'll narrow it up so it'll tuck in nice, and then it's just a matter of punching some holes and welding it in. Anyway, let's get going on this, shall we? All right, so here we are. We're in the car and we're just kind of taking a look here, and there's some things that need to be adjusted before we can even start trying to fit this. The first thing I did is I just took the pan and I held it up to the heater channel because I wanted to make sure all the bolt holes lined up. And they actually don't line up too bad. I'm pretty okay with that. There's a couple of holes we might need to make an adjustment to, but for the most part things lined up pretty good. But this lip right here is much too wide, and the seat track on the floor pan actually hits this, and it doesn't let it come over far enough to even get close to lining up with the bolt holes. So what we're going to do here is just give this a mark, and I'm just going to trim this back, and for right now I'm only going to trim it back far enough to give me the clearance I need to make sure I can fit everything. Later, as we get moving further in this project, I eventually plan on shortening this entire lip along the whole length just to clean things up, make sure the carpet fits right, and all in all just make it a nicer job. But for today, that's not necessary. We really only need the clearance for the seat track. So I've just got my silver Sharpie here, and I'm just going to line this up roughly where I think it needs to be. And now I can just go ahead and just leave myself a mark. So what we'll end up doing here is I'll go, an inch or so in front of that, an inch behind it. We'll just put a notch in it, something like that, and that should give us plenty of clearance. So I'm going to go ahead and get that cut out, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, well there we go. That was easy enough. Now that I've got this slot in here, we can go ahead and put the floor pan up against the heater channel and really check the alignment on all the bolt holes. What we'll do is I'm going to throw a couple of bolts in. Probably 3 bolts, just kind of hold things in place and really check the alignment. Once I've got that figured out, then I can determine which side I need to cut metal off of in order to get this to fit in the chassis. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'll get things bolted up, and I'll bring you right back in a second. All right, so here we are. I've got the floor pan bolted up in place. It's just got two bolts holding it, and I've got my jack supporting it so it's not sagging too bad. And I've gone and I've adjusted it as much as I can to kind of get things lined up, just to give us an idea of where we need to go. And it's not too bad. There's a couple of holes that are a little on the questionable side, but let me just point you up at this so you can see what's going on. All right, well we're going to start up here in the front, and this frontmost attachment point is pretty darn close. It's basically centered in the hole front to back, close enough left to right that we can call that one good. If we move back one here you can see that this hole doesn't quite make it. Things are off just a little bit. But that, I can live with that. If we just open this hole up just a hair, that should be plenty of clearance for what we need. So at this point, I'm good with these two. Now this one here is probably the worst of all of them. You can see that half of the hole is actually covered up in the heater channel. And so we're going to have to really open this guy up to make sure we've got clearance. But if that's the only one we have to do, I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'll show you the rest of them, but they actually are sitting pretty good. So these next two, this one obviously fits because I've got the bolt in there, and this one is right up close to the edge. But again, that's pretty tolerable for me. And still moving back, we just have a few left here. You can see that this one's darn near perfect. It's a little bit close to the inside of the car, but plenty of room there. So that one I'm not worried about. And the next one back, again, I've got a bolt in there, and that threads in and out easy. So I know that that one's lined up. Here's another one. This is the second to last one towards the back. And again, it's lined up just about perfect here. Now the last one here in the far back corner, you can see that the hole is a little bit off center in the floor pan, but it's not too bad. So really, we're ready to kind of figure out how we want to make this adjustment. What I ended up doing on the other side is I used this hole to line it up with the original hole that's in the rear cross member. So I think I'm going to do the exact same thing. This is going to be our alignment hole right here. So now that we see how things are fitting, let's pull this chassis out and let's get to fitting things. So the chassis has been pulled out from under the car, so that should give us plenty of room around the outside, so we can kind of see what's going on and start making some adjustments here. I have the pan laid in place, and I just wanted to show you just how much longer it actually is than the opening that it's supposed to fit in. Up here in the front, we can kind of get a sense of just how wide this pan is. This outside edge here is supposed to line up and fit just over top of this frame head here. It looks like it's about, I'd say a ½ inch wider than it's supposed to be, which just means we need to take that much material off of this inside edge. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not worried about that. I prefer things to be a little bit too big so I can actually trim it to the exact shape and size that I need to make sure everything fits right. All right, so in the back here, you can see that the hole in the floor pan doesn't quite line up with the hole in the cross member. And that's really not a big deal. What we're going to do is we're just simply going to trim the back side of this pan off until the holes line up. Then we know with this hole lined up that all the remaining holes should line up with our heater channel. To make this determination here, I'm just simply going to take my caliper. I'm going to measure the distance from the front edge of this hole in the pan to the front edge of the hole in the cross member. I'll lock that in, and now I can just simply come along and scribe a line all the way along the pan edge here, and then that should allow this to shift back far enough to get these to line up. Now I do want to give myself just a little bit of a cushion. I want to have just the tiniest bit of gap, maybe a 1/16 of an inch gap back here. So I know that I've got a little bit of adjustment. So I will extend this line in just a hair. But then once I get this trimmed to length, then the rest of the adjustments will be done up on the front of the pan. So let me go ahead and get this trimmed off, and then we'll refit it and kind of see how things are sitting. And here we are. We've got the back trimmed up, and you can see now that the hole is just about lined up. Now as we pushed it further back to get this lined up, it did shift out this way just a little bit, but that's not a big deal because we still have to cut off of the long side anyway. So at least with this lined up now, we can go up to the front of the pan and shorten that up. So once we get the front shortened up, then this should drop down. And then all we have to do is figure out how much needs to come off of the inside. All right, so here we are up at the front, and you can see where it's running into the frame head here, and it won't let the pan actually drop down. This will be an easy cut. What we're going to do is I'll just take a tape measure and actually measure the distance between the rear cross member and this front cross member, and then we just transfer that over to the pan. I'll use a straight edge to mark my line, and then we know exactly how much needs to get cut off. So let me grab a tape measure and we'll get going on this. All right, here we are. Got the tape measure, and I'm going to measure this in two locations. I want to measure it out next to where the side member comes in, and I want to measure it on the inside corner. And I just need to make sure that I keep my tape measure parallel to the tunnel, so when I apply these measurements to the floor pan, I can do the same thing and get it cut as accurate as possible. So making sure that the tape measure is nice and straight, I'll just take a quick peek, and it looks like we're at about 66.25 on the outside edge here. And again, like I did in the rear, I am going to cut this a little bit short. I'll probably cut it like 66 1/8 to 3/16 in that neighborhood. We've got plenty of lip here, so I'm not worried about anything there. I just want to make sure that things are going to be able to slide around just a little bit. We'll probably go 66 1/8 just to give us a little bit of wiggle room so we know that things are going to be able to slide around and fit the way we want them to. Now measuring on the inside is a little bit trickier because you got to bend things around a little bit, but again, just doing my best to keep the tape measure square to the tunnel. And this comes out to, it looks like it's the same, 66 1/4. And so now we can go ahead and transfer those marks over. Well, here we go. If I have everything measured and cut correctly, this should just drop right in and just have a little bit of forward-back wiggle room. We know it's still too wide, not worried about that, but if it fits in lengthwise, then what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll make some measurements and figure out how much we need to trim off this long side. So let's just set this in place and see how we did. Look at that. Fits just like we wanted. So we have a little bit of forward and back wiggle room, which is just the way we wanted it to. And now it's really just a matter of narrowing it up so we can actually slide it in and get it to drop down on this front cross member and get the hole in the rear to line up. So let's just take a quick peek at these now and see how much we need to cut off of the inside. All right, I'm going to start up here in the front and make our first measurement. And really what has to happen is we need to shift this whole piece over so it'll sit down over this little boss. So what I'll do is I'll just go back to my caliper. I'm going to grab that, measure the space here, and it really just needs to be in the ballpark. And so if I go right about there, again, we're going to cut a little bit more off just to make sure we've got some wiggle room here. But it looks like I'm about that much. So that's looks like 380 thousandths. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go ahead and scribe a line here at the 380. And then if it changes in the back, then we can always use a straight edge. So let's hop to the back now and see how much we need to take off there. All right, so back here, we're just going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to measure the amount I want to take off. And I'm measuring to the outside of the pan here because that'll, again, give me just a little bit of wiggle room here. And that looks like it is it looks like 395, so it's just a tad bit more than in the front. So really, I think that's going to be a good number to shoot for. All right, so now that we've got our measurements, we're going to go ahead and get this marked up. Now I've already got a mark up here in the front that we scratched a few few minutes ago. And now I'm just going to go ahead and put one in the back. And I do not trust that this edge is going to be straight, which is why I'm not going to just scribe a line the whole way. I want to actually use a straight edge here, so I know that this ends up good and straight. So for that, what we'll do, I'm just going to use my 4-foot framing level here. And I can see that it's not quite long enough, so we're going to bring this mark just a little bit further here. So now this should line up with that mark and with that mark. And now I'm just going to go ahead and get this clamped on here. So I'm just going to use one of my quick clamps here. A regular C-clamp would work just as well. All right, so now that we've got everything lined up here the way we want it to, now it's just a matter of scribing a line to follow this. So let's do that. Now we go ahead and remove our clamps. And now we've got a nice straight line. Now to finish this off, I do have this radius here that I have to deal with. And so I am just going to go ahead and set my caliper up, and we'll just trace this. And that brings it right around, lines it up with our existing mark. And that should be good. May not be perfect, but we can always come in and trim a little bit more off if necessary. So now I'm just going to go ahead and get this all cut to the right width here, and hopefully just a little bit of fitting and we'll be done. All right, well, let's see how we did, shall we? If we did this right, it should just slip right in. And check that out. That is just about perfect. Needs to slide forward just a little bit, but it looks like it's just hanging up on the little channel, so that'll be an easy adjustment. Let's see how we did in the back as far as getting that hole lined up. Well, there you go. Check that out. That lines up exactly like we wanted it to. Almost like it was designed that way. Again, we got a little bit of wiggle room here. It can slide forward or back. So that is nice. Well, there we are. That's pretty good. I'm really liking how it's sitting right now. There's a little bit in the back corner that needs to be adjusted just to make sure it clears the weld that holds that cross member on there. And then we still need to clean up all of the rest of the chassis. I never actually finished that once I cut the old floor pans out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm just going to get the rest of this all cleaned up. We'll get into the corners, make sure that's clean. And then we got to do some final fitting because things aren't shaped quite correct. There's a bit of a gap here, so we'll just go ahead and start banging things around until we get a nice fit. And this is looking real good.